Anyway, here's the thing. Life is complicated. But it ain't that complicated. You know, it's like people create realities that you have to think about. You know, one thing that's true in life is it's a matter of training. You know, when things happen in this world, you have to respond a certain way. And everything works together in what I always like to think of as lock and key type situations. You know, what Sam Harris was talking about free will and it doesn't exist. And one of the big points he makes was the fact that, you know, that we don't know what decisions we're going to make. But in a way, the thing is that it's like this. All of our decisions and choices can be predicted ahead of time, especially if you observe a person over a period of time, you look at how they do things, you can pretty much predict how they're going to react to things. People react according to how they were trained. See, the thing is, look, if you're driving your car and you see a red light, you see the light turn red, you stop. When it turns green, you go. You can pretty much predict that. It's like, duh. Sometimes the predictability is so routine, it's even boring. It's not even interesting. It's not even worthy of scientific study. But it's important to note this stuff. See, the one thing that Sam Harris doesn't want to get into is the fact that a lot of research is very tedious and boring. And he doesn't do that. The thing is, we train ourselves to react to things. You know, it's like a cop who has to train themselves to deal with a deadly force situation. You may never, ever in your lifetime, you could be a cop. There are cops been on the police force for 30 years, 35, 40 years. Never had to deal with deadly force situations. Never. But you train for it. You train just in case. So that your responses and your reactions become pretty sure. How you're going to react to it. You try to predict, you try to prepare for it, you try to, you know, you think of every possible scenario, what could have happened, what happened, you think, and you work it into your mind so that if it ever happens, you're going to respond. You don't have time literally to sit there and even think or decide what to do. You have to simply react. Period. You react to things. Something's happening. Everything you're going on automatic. You're reacting. In a few seconds, the whole thing is over. And maybe you did everything right, or you did it as good as it could be expected under the circumstances. There's no guarantee of perfection, but you know, the training exists because people may know that if you just throw somebody out there with no training, they're more likely to screw things up royally. If you train them, yeah, things might get screwed up, but it's less likely to happen. You cut down on the screw up factor by training a person to react. Well, our minds get used to being trained. And once we train something, everything works on what I call lock and key. Because once you see a situation, you react to it. If you see an opportunity, you respond. It's the way it is in life. You know, if you're walking down the street and you see a $100 bill, you immediately pick it up. I mean, before you could even form the thought, gee, let me pick up this $100 bill, before that thought could be complete, you got the $100 bill stuffed in your pocket. You know, before you could even complete the thought. The point is that the fact that you respond to things before it even comes to consciousness doesn't mean you don't have free will. You have free will in the sense that you are free to train yourself to react differently. It's the same like when I learned Spanish. You're basically training yourself to recognize words, to say words. You know, you're training your mind just like you did it inadvertently when you were learning English, at least for those of us who speak English as a native language. You know, we inadvertently learned it. Well, you learned it here. In this case, you learned it vertently. I suppose, if there's such a word. You know, you actually learned it on purpose. You train yourself. So when somebody says rojo, I know. You know, or azul, you know, blue, azul, or rojo. You know immediately. You know exactly. You know what they're saying. You know in an instant. The word comes to you. The ideal comes to you. You know, I can train myself to learn, you know, things in Japanese. Like ao, which means blue, and aka, which means red. You know, you learn those things. You train yourself to respond so that when you hear it. But that's where the free will comes in. It's really a matter of, there's like two parts of you. There's one part of you that's very free and can do things at any time, and another part of you that's almost a little bit slower, that has to be trained to react and trained to respond. So it's like two parts to you. You know, one thing is true is we don't have absolute freedom, but we do have freedom. Having free will doesn't mean that you have an absolute freedom. You are restricted. You're restricted by the laws of physics. You're restricted by society. You're restricted by pressures around you. You're restricted by your own biology. But you don't, your restrictions aren't absolute. You do have choices. Yeah, you have to eat, but you have choices of what to eat. You have choices of when to eat. You have choices of how much to eat, for example. But you don't choose the fact that your body needs food to survive. You can't just turn that off, you know. There are factors. It's just a point I wanted to make. It's a very simple point. You don't have absolute choices, but, you know, so the thing about free will is that if you mean that free will means you have absolute freedom, then no, there is no absolute freedom. But that you have some degree of freedom. Yeah, a degree of freedom is freedom. Even if it's a small amount, it's still freedom. And that small amount is really what counts. That's the thing.